Welcome, everyone. My name is Karen Kowal, and I am a directing analyst here at Homebase. We're thrilled to have you all here for our Creative Strategies to Enhance Your Budget webinar. Thank you for ending your day with us, or having your lunch with us, or just taking time out of your day to listen to this great webinar that we have for today. So a little bit about, I think you can go to the next slide, Tanya. Okay, well, we're gonna do some housekeeping. I'm gonna start talking about Homebase. For those of you who don't know us already, Homebase, we've been around for over 35 years. We've been a national technical assistance provider and trainer for homeless systems of care during that time. We work with a variety of folks. We work directly with counties, cities, and COCs each year, and we provide a lot of training and technical assistance for folks. How do we do this? We offer a range of services that are tailored to the local landscape, which is one of the things that I love most about working at Homebase. We facilitate a lot of planning, analysis, and implementation to advance equity, and then we translate these practices into real world solutions that people can implement. And what are some of the ways that we do this? We do policy briefs and tools. We do cross-sector collaboration and partnerships. You might see a lot of our work in the healthcare and criminal legal sectors. We do system building, strategic planning, and facilitation. And again, lots of training, technical assistance, and capacity building, both for organizations and leads for COCs. And then we do data analysis and evaluation. Just wanted to explain some of the tech parts because I already saw someone Node asked about where we can ask questions. You're all muted. Please keep yourself muted if you can during the presentation. There'll be an opportunity to ask questions at the end. We have captions available. Feel free to click show captions and add the captions to your screen if you need them. In regard to questions, both the chat and the Q&A are available to folks today on this webinar. We would prefer if you put your questions in the Q&A, just because it's a little bit easier to collect, but also if you have the Q&A open and you're seeing people's questions, you can vote them up so that they will be, we'll start with the most popular questions when we do the Q&A. If you have any tech issues, the email is ta@homebase.org. If you're having any challenges with the webinar, there are a couple other Homebasers on to help with that, specifically Nora and Tanya. But I'm going to actually pass it over to Mary, who's going to introduce herself and then get us going with the panel.
Hi, I'm Mary Simons. I'm a directing analyst here at Homebase. Before coming to Homebase, I was a director of a COC collaborative applicant who also did direct services for 10 years. So I have been in that role of trying to make payroll, even when grants have expired and the new one hasn't been signed yet, different things that happen over time, recognizing that the time we're in now is more uncertain than many other times we've ever been in. Because of that uncertainty, we have some great panelists here today to talk about the work they've done over time in building emergency funds or building reserves or diversifying activities so that they can do the work and do it without interruption. We also are very fortunate to have a senior program officer for a foundation here to give us some insight into that world. So we are so excited. If you each could introduce yourselves, yes, we'll go Diane, Cornelius, and then Nancy.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for allowing us to be a part of this. My name is Diane Easley. I'm the founder and director of Community Care Network in Mississippi. We have three programs primarily. We have shelter, and then some of our COC programs are our youth program, YHDP, and some permanent supportive housing. I have been in the nonprofit sector for about 30 years, and prior to that, a nursing career and also as a management specialist.
Thanks, Cornelius Sanders, Promise Development here in Memphis, Tennessee. The three things we do is housing, supportive services, and economic development. I've been with Promise for about 18, 19 years. Prior to that, was working with a parachurch organization here in the city, and glad to be here.
Hi, everyone. Happy to be with you today. My name is Nancy Curry. I'm a senior program officer for a couple foundations here in the Tulsa area, but today I'm representing the Ann and Henry Zero Foundation, and it's a place-based funding organization here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I've been at the foundation for about 7 years, and prior to this, I'm a licensed clinical social worker. So I've worked in a variety of settings, including our local county jail and inpatient, outpatient, all sorts of settings, and happy to be with you today.
Thank you so much to everyone on our panel. I do want to remind everyone that this is the second in a series of working with finances in uncertain times. This is talking about expanding your resources. The reason we're doing that is in section number 1. We heard lots and lots and lots of questions about how in the world can we expand our dollars? How can we build an emergency fund? How can we expand our activities? And we decided to go ahead and ask the experts, and that's why they're here. And we have some questions for them that were born out of those questions from the first webinar. Diane, you have been successful in building your emergency reserves over time by telling your story to faith partners in the community, service organizations, government entities, and others. Can you tell us about that and how that has worked for you?
Well, I'd like to be more successful at it than I am, but I think what we've done in the last 2 years is make a concerted effort to not look at as much of our grant funding, because we just had a feeling it was going to be a lot. I had no idea it was going to be as different as it is right now. But so we just sat down as a group with our board and our staff and went, we need to think completely outside the box. And we've been able to raise close to 6 months reserve, which we'd never had with this organization before. So we now aren't comfortable, but we feel better. And I think one of the things that I've had to do is make sure that we have staff. We do not have a development director. We have a small staff, but we have had to realign our time. And I've really had to designate time. And it's not what I'd rather do. I'd rather be here at the shelter and with the staff and with clients. And but if I don't designate the time to be away talking to people, even if I designate it, half the time it's going to work. We're all so busy and we all wear so many hats. But one of the things that I'm doing now, and I'm trying to do more of, is speak to a completely different group of people than just the Rotary clubs and Kiwanis and churches, but go into businesses. I would say the biggest thing that I have found that works for me is, first of all, if you're walking in as a nonprofit, they're expecting you to ask for money. So I do not go asking for money. I go asking for who should I speak to that needs to know about what we do. And I have found that opens more doors than anything else I can do. I'm constantly asking everybody, who do you need? Who do I need to go see? Who needs to know about our mission and what we do? And then in that, I'm able to segue into some kind of very relevant story. It's about tell your story, tell the story, not the statistics. I'm going to follow it with some statistics, but I'm going to want to tell a story. I think the most important thing I could say is you don't know where it's going to land and you don't know what it's going to lead to. I can kind of give you an example. We bought a new facility and had to completely gut it. We had 5,000 square feet of nothing other than the outside walls. It was in terrible shape. I had a meeting to speak with 5 little ladies at a church. I was going to say elderly, but they're probably my age now, but this was about 6 years ago. I really didn't. I'm going to be honest. I just wanted to tell them what we did, and I hoped maybe they would do a toilet paper drive or something for us. I just wanted to get the word out and let people know what we did. I told them what we had done, that we had had to take out all the flooring, and did anybody know how to paint concrete? Because I think that's the best we'll be able to afford. 2 days later, I got a phone call from someone who said, "You don't know me, but I'm the vice president of Doll Tile in Texas, and my mother says I have to tile your facility. How big is it?" Well, it's 5,000 square feet. Next thing I know, we've got an 18-wheeler pulling up with brand new tile. Then it was like, I don't know how to put tile down. So we contacted a church. We had volunteers come put that tile down. One of those was a retired engineer from Chevron. That way, it led us to find out that that particular industry would send retired people to, and there were electricians and plumbers and air conditioner people. They not only sent them to volunteer their hours, they paid us for the hours that they worked. So all of that ended up with $3,000-4,000 in today's market of free labor that completely renovated our shelter. We only had to buy roofing and pretty much everything else, but that came from speaking to 5 people. I did not know one of them's son was the vice president of the tile company. So I would say you just don't know. Get your message out to as many people as you can. Speak to every civic club. I hate doing that. I just hate it, but I will do it because our clients need us to tell their story. They can't tell their story. And so we speak to as many groups as we can and then see what comes from there.
So Diane, how can others get started if they've never done this before or never done fundraising in this way before? How can people get started in telling their story to build their resources?
Make a list of people that you can start with. You've got to start with it written down as goals. I want to see 10 people this month. I'm going to find a way to fit it into my schedule. And then try to find out who the informal leaders may be. For instance, I don't call a church and ask to speak to a pastor. I know they're busy and they may not get back with me. I'm going to try to find somebody. But again, everybody that I'm speaking to, I'm asking them, who do you know? I did it yesterday at a bank and she gave me some names. Then I asked her, would you mind making the introduction for me? I don't know the people on the list that she gave me. I'm uncomfortable just calling them cold, but I can say that she asked me to give you a call and I'll ask her to do it. Does that help?
I think so. I think it's very helpful. It gives me a lot of things to think about. So thank you very much. Cornelius, as we understand, you've built a very healthy organization through diversifying your activities that benefit the whole community and the whole person. Can you tell us how those things came about around housing development, workforce development, other kinds of operational diversity, and how you've been able to weather these recent times?
Great. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, Cornelius Sanders, thanks for allowing me to be here. We started with housing because in the community that we were in, we knew that that was the main need for our particular community. And that's the area that we had the expertise in. And doing the housing and development and building, we saw that all of, if not all, a lot of our money was leaving the community. None was staying with the organization. So we began to think about what are those things that we could do that was maybe low skill and be able to generate some revenue for us and keep some of the money that we were receiving. One of the things we first started with was the landscaping piece because we looked at it and said, man, we could lay sod. It's just the fuzzy side up. So we began to do sodding and lawn care, and that grew into a full-time business that we were able to generate some revenue. And in development, once you build houses, then you have folk that are in there that are renting those units. You have some of that income coming back into your organization to be able to do additional affordable housing as well as help to build a reserve. We start seeing that some of our clients was doing in-house moving in a sense. This apartment complex had been sold or no longer fit the needs. Instead of us renting or hiring someone else out to do that, we would hire some of the folk that had experienced homelessness to be able to help us with that. So then it not only cut down on the cost, but then it gave us some additional funds to be able to do other things with, as Diane said, to help build a reserve.
Very good. How has that been helpful in this? I think you also have some COC dollars for services and a grant that expired before the new one was signed. How has this diversity helped you to weather that gap?
Right. So with our permanent supportive housing grant that we have, so we were developers and moved into doing supportive services as well. So that was something new for us. We always served people and cared about the folk that we serve. We just did do that part. So we applied and received several grants. One of our grants is on that cycle of September through August, but the other is a January end date. And that particular grant is never approved prior to it ending in January. So we most times go all the way through April or May without any of those fundings. So on that development side, the housing side, the lawn care side, we're able to have dollars that continue to pay staff, continue to pay for the service that we have until that grant comes online and is allowed for us to draw down. The first time, I thought we were going to lose our mind in the fact of how we're going to be able to keep staff and continue to serve the population that we were serving. So once that happens to you once or twice, you begin to try to figure that thing out and say, this is not a one-off. This is sort of what's going to happen each year. So you begin to build, save for those times. So that's how we've been able to do it.
And what advice do you have for others so that they can think about replicating some of the work to diversify their activities? If someone has focused mainly on service dollars or mainly in one area, how might they think about diversifying?
So I think with us, it came with experience. What type of experience do we have on our board, in our staff members? What other things could they do? And then what things did we do or could do better than anyone else? And what are the needs in our communities and how can you fill that gap? And back to what we said, one of those was we need additional housing in our community, and then all of those services that come along with it. Houses need to be cleaned, units need to be cleaned, grass need to be mowed, those type of things. So we begin to look at that and see what were the low-hanging fruit. Would it cost us an absorbent amount to get started in that? Or was the cost low to enter? And that's some of the things that we begin to do and then replicate that in other communities as we begin to grow.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Nancy, as a philanthropist, how did your organization get involved in funding the homeless services system? And why is it important for philanthropy to assist in addressing homelessness?
Well, the mission of the Ann and Henry Zero Foundation is to lift our neighbors out of poverty by supporting housing and shelter resources, social services, basic human needs, accessible health and mental health care, and then also programs that empower and inspire our community members. So our founders, Ann and Henry Zero, who have both passed, but they knew what it was like to not have enough and to be hungry and to not be able to get access to medical care and to be in the middle of winter without a coat. And they also felt a real responsibility that when they did have resources, that they had an obligation to help others. And Ann and Henry's devotion to it's this Jewish ideal of tzedakah. It's like righteous giving, and that still holds true today. And it's honored by both their children and their grandchildren that make up our board. Tzedakah is considered a core Jewish value, and it reflects a belief that giving to those in need is not just a good deed, but it's a moral and just requirement. And so we see that in the decisions that our trustees and our board make today. We see that the foundation sees that homelessness is, unfortunately, I'm sure everyone on this call knows, but it's the predictable result of failed systems, of stagnant wages, of rising costs of housing. And so they feel a real responsibility to do their part in addressing it through their grant making. And our board chair often says, she references the Talmud, which says, we are not obligated to complete the work of repairing the world, but neither are we free to abandon it. And we see that in their grant making. The second part of your question, kind of why is it important for philanthropy to assist in addressing homelessness? And I think we're all well aware that the United States is in this very real housing crisis. And when individuals working full-time can't afford housing on any minimum wage salary without being cost burdened, like we all have a problem. So making homelessness rare, brief, and non-recurring is going to take everybody, and that's all sectors, whether that's business, the faith community, government, nonprofit leaders, mental health providers, hospitals, schools, and certainly philanthropy. And some of the areas that we've seen the Ann and Henry Zero Foundation, seeing that philanthropy has been able to fill gaps, been able to fund capacity building work or maybe like a new organization is scaling up or expanding services or programs into a needed area to meet community need. In Tulsa, we funded a consultant, actually Homebase, to assist our community in completing a strategic plan. It took 18 months and a lot of community member hours that really resulted in a new kind of governance structure and real significant change for our local COC. So I think there's so many ways philanthropy can step up, but there's absolutely a responsibility for everybody, including us.
Well, thank you so much. What tips do you have for communities to engage philanthropy in their areas in addressing homelessness and funding projects or even operations?
I think it's always good to just preface this with, if you've heard this common saying, right? If you've spoken to one funder, you've spoken to one funder. So while I can't speak for everyone, I can speak for our foundation. Again, we're place-based here and really connected to our Tulsa community. Every funder has unique processes, unique priorities, but I can share, so from our perspective, in Tulsa, like our COC, we have a dedicated funder representative seat on the governance council, and it's been a really nice way to not necessarily do a lot of planning and then later come to a funder and say, well, gosh, we've made all these decisions and now we'd like you to fund it, but really involving funders along the way who frankly sometimes might say, actually, it seems like you might need additional funding over here, or maybe something that a small amount of grant making could assist with, but if you didn't have a funder at the table to make the offer, it might not have happened. Having those funders engaged in the work, like throughout our strategic planning. So now every 5 years, as we do that strategic planning, funders are engaged. We have funders serving on task forces here in Tulsa, serving on the review and rank panel for the NOFO. It's a really good way for funders to learn the critical work that organizations on this Zoom call do every day to address homelessness is very important. And in some ways, it's also mysterious because y'all use a lot of acronyms and HUD speak, and it can be really overwhelming. And so I think any time that you can kind of pull funders in and get them up to speed, it's a really good opportunity to relationship build and help funders understand at a level that may increase the likelihood for grant making, as opposed to just, this is so technical and complicated, I don't really understand. And kind of keeping in mind, I'll speak from my perspective as a staff member, I have to take that information and go educate my board about it. And if I don't understand it, that's really intimidating. And so for me personally, being involved in a really deep way has just made it a lot easier to understand the need and to translate the need to the decision makers at my organization.
That is so helpful. Thank you very much. So I know that throughout the great panel discussion here, there's been some questions that have shown up in the Q&A. Karen, do you want to start with a couple of questions?
Sure. We had one that was I think it's directly to Cornelius, but I think if anyone has experience, did you employ you mentioned working with clients, did you employ them to do the work? And if so, how did you manage kind of the dual relationship of someone that you've employed and also are providing services to?
Yes, we did. And will not actually bring them on staff as employee. It was more of a contractual relationship. And we have supportive services guys as well as housing. So the supportive services guys would kind of work with them one-on-one, and the housing person be responsible for the logistics of it all, who we're moving, where we're moving, and we just determined or decided a fair salary for those particular hours that you were going to work, or based on per move.
Sorry, Corinne, that's great. Actually, I had one question following up with the last thing that Nancy said. I was wondering about ways that you have like kind of tailored your message to the idea of like jargon. Like we have a very jargony sector, right? I'm interested in like Diane, Cornelius, and also like what are ways that you've kind of like changed, or how do you change your story based on the audience, or how do you make it simple, like so we're not so jargony, or that I think that's a lot of the conversation I hear lately of like we have to talk to the audience, right? And I'm interested if you have any tips and tricks for folks with that.
I'd like to add something. When I say tell the story, that's what I lead with if I'm talking to an audience. I mean, like a group, especially. Example, I was speaking to a Rotary Club. I had my talk that I had planned to give them, but the day before, in the middle of a staff meeting, we found out about a 17-year-old pregnant girl that slept in the woods. So when they introduced me, the first thing I said was, let me tell you what homelessness looks like to us. And I told the story before I went into, this is what our organization does, and all of the questions afterwards came back to, what can I do to help that girl? Are there more people like her? Tell us about what's going on in our community with young adults. But it all came from getting that story out there before I started any. We don't tell them we have a YHDP program. It's that we serve youth, we serve young adults. So it was a matter of, every place I go, I try to lead with a story, because that's what they're going to remember more than the list of our programs and what they do.
I love that. And I would add one thing that I've seen people do in conversation with us. So like I mentioned, different funding entities are going to have their own priorities. And a lot of organizations do a lot of work, or they might serve a variety of populations. And so trying to tailor the stories that you select or the data that's shared, whatever it may be, with the funding priorities of the organization you're talking to. So if you're talking to an organization that really cares about early childhood, they don't care about homelessness, but they sure care about the early childhood and these young people in our community. And you are seeing an increase in families that you are serving and children under, the age of 5 or whatever. They may not list homelessness as a priority, and you don't even have to talk about homelessness, but you can talk about the trends that you're seeing and the stories of the children that are served. And I think sometimes, well, it might be easier to just kind of have the deck pitch that you want to use with everybody. You're going to have a better bang for the buck if you do tailor it, and, do the research, hit the web and look at the priorities of whoever you're talking to, and really try to connect with them on an area that is important to their work.
Gotcha. And what we do, back to the story, is personalize it. And one of the things that really hit me was we were at a city council meeting, and they come out in the audience and do the index cards, and you have to put your name and address on there. And the only way you get an opportunity to speak is you fill out this card and put your address on there. We were there to talk about homelessness, and we had a group of folk that didn't have an address. So, because of that, you mean to tell me that these individuals speaking on this topic, that are experts on this topic, doesn't give an opportunity to speak because they don't have an address? And that moved me in a way to say, we're going to have to do something, because if I can't have a voice with people that have been voted in to serve us, and because I don't have an address, something is wrong with that. And so we just try to personalize the story depending on who we're talking about. And it's not stuff that we heard, it's people that we see, come alongside of, and work with every day.
Great. Diane, I just want to make sure you didn't have another comment since I see you're off
No,
mute.
he just reminded me that we've just had elections and I have a new mayor and a whole set of aldermen that I've got to go see sometime this month because I knew the older ones. I knew the ones that got voted out. I don't know personally the ones that are voted in, and they need to have a face connected to an organization. So yeah, thank you, Cornelius. It's on my list.
That's great. We had one question, and Mike, I'm gonna invite you to come off mute, but the question was written, what suggestions do you have for organizations transitioning? We might need a little more context of what transitioning organizations mean. Or feel free to put in the chat too. Maybe we have well, Mike might be.
Okay,
There he is. Great.
so
Go for
what I mean by my question is, so this organization, the Devereaux Center, has been around for about 15 years and then was under another name prior to that. And we developed a black eye in the community because they saw coagulation and, not here, not in my backyard syndrome type stuff. And with what Nancy just talked about, or Diane just talked about, I mean, as far as like new government, right? People were getting ready to be reelected and so on and so forth. So we got the brunt of the attention. And now we have to do satellite services. We can't do drop-in site services anymore. And as somebody said, if you've only talked to one funder, you've only talked to one funder. But in our experience, we learned that if one funder knows that you're having said issues, then everybody seems to know. And how have some people dealt with that?
Thanks, Mike.
I'll
I would
jump
say
in.
oh, go ahead, Cornelius.
Go ahead, Donna.
I was going to say one thing is people love to give their opinion more than they love to give their time or their money. And so some of those people I would be going to possibly and going, I know there's been issues. What do you see that we could do to mitigate that? What do you think we need to do to serve our community? You get them involved in helping you maybe solve, and I know that, you address what's in the room. I know there's issues, but I need your help. I need your suggestions on what we can do to solve this in a different way. And you may come up with somebody that will then buy into the new solutions because they helped create it.
And a couple of things for us, when I joined the organization, the name was North Memphis CDC at the time. And because of growth, we kind of outgrew North Memphis, so it made sense to change the name. But the organization was $480,000 in debt. The 501c3 had been restricted or canceled in the sense. And the city came back and said there are certain things that we have to do. So part of that is folk have to get to know you, the new leadership, the heart that you guys have, the work that you're willing to do, and the fact that you're here to be a good neighbor and that you want to hear what they have to say. And then recently we were putting in an application to purchase a hotel and transform it to some permanent supportive housing. Initially, we got support from the local leaders in government. And then I got a private call to say, you guys doing affordable housing? And we said yes. And they was like, well, I don't know if we're going to support you now. We want posh living downtown. And you're like, posh living downtown. And sometimes they don't understand the type of people, who you're going to serve, who you're putting in, and those folk probably are already in their communities. And for you being out so they can see you, the work that you do, the commitment you're putting into it, and they know that folk are already experiencing homelessness or whatever it is in their community. And actually, this would be a safer place for people to be than just out in the neighborhood. Hopefully that helps a little bit.
Thank you both. I had a question. How do you approach liquidity issues related to grant payments received multiple months after the expenses have been incurred? This probably might be a Diane and Cornelius question.
I think you aren't going to answer it really quickly. That's why you have to plan for the future. And that's what we're dealing with now. We see some grants that aren't probably going to be renewed or maybe changed drastically. We're going to be spending money that we raised this year for that gap period, if that's what I'm understanding the question to be, because it's really important that we be able to still serve the clients in the community. We're right now trying to raise money for what may happen with grants and so forth in 2026. So we're having to plan ahead for that. And that means I've got to designate more of my time to raise money outside that cycle. And I didn't used to have to do that as much, but I just do. I think also it is critical that we are dealing with our state legislators who then can also speak nationally for us. We don't know what's going to happen, but if they don't hear from us, then they may be making up their own minds on that. One thing that you might want to look at, different states have different tax credit programs that we didn't know anything about. And it came from another part of our state who told us about it. Then we met with our state legislators and found that a lot of states have they're very specific, but they're tax credit programs. We've been able to capitalize on that. We didn't even know about that, but people that owe property tax or state income tax and other things are able to give to us because of that tax credit program. I don't know how long it's going to last, but you better believe I'm going to capitalize on it as long as it does. And I'm going to be meeting with legislators to explain to them how critical it is and how we can take that money and make it go further than it can if it goes through all the pockets of the state. And so I would tell everybody, go to your Department of Revenue and start looking to see if there are any tax credit programs. And they may be hidden in other ones, but they may be there. I don't know.
So, Diane, this tax credit, is it
Yes.
where the giver can deduct off their taxes, or is this cash money to your organization?
It's cash money to our organization, a dollar for dollar credit. And it's amazing. Again, I don't know how long it's going to last, but there were enough studies done that showed them that the nonprofits sectors that they studied were able to make that money go further than the state was able to, because there were so many different segments that came out of it. So right now, we're able to capitalize, and it's dollar for dollar. They give to our organization, and they get a letter that they turn in when they do their taxes saying 50% of this was given to this organization, and they get dollar for dollar credit. It's a pretty amazing program. And a lot of states, 3 or 4 states that I've looked at, have some kind of program like that. If they don't, and they want to give tax credits to people making movies in your state, well, then go talk to them about giving tax credits for people that we are serving.
Great. Any other comments about the liquidity? And
I was going to add one thing. I think for anyone on the call who maybe does receive funding from a private funder, family foundation or corporate or other, that might be something worth talking about. You know, needs that don't get voiced don't ever get met, and people can't read your mind. And so sometimes it may be, we've funded on occasion like a we call them evergreen grants, but it really is just that cash flow grant so that an organization then does have the upfront money and can get, and we never would have thought to do that if an organization didn't, let us know that they were having that problem. But I also think it's an opportunity for COC leads, if that's a difficulty for several organizations, to kind of compile all that to make that case and help with the advocacy, so that if it's at the municipal level or state level or whatever that may be, that those making those decisions, I mean, that gap may not have to be there. And if decision makers can see the impact on the community and how difficult that is on organizations providing critical services, I think having multiple organizations being impacted by that information pulled together can make a stronger case.
Great. The next question we have is, I'm going to start with Nancy, but Diane and Cornelius, if you have ideas, please weigh in. Can you talk more about involving funders in strategic planning?
Yeah, we've been invited to participate in a variety of different ways. So earlier I was referencing, I don't think I was very clear about that, but that we were involved in the Continuum of Care strategic plan. So this community-wide planning process, and we served in every capacity imaginable. So if there were committees, we served on the committees. If there were task forces, we served on the task forces. And so in Tulsa, that was kind of a unique situation where for years, our kind of HUD's, required strategic plans were a little bit more check the box plan. And so we were doing some catch up and really meaningful planning. And so, that's going to look different every 5 years. But I mean, we were just asked to participate and did. So I don't know how to be more specific about that, but we have also been invited to participate in, sometimes when an organization that we fund, or maybe don't even fund, is doing a new strategic plan for their 5-year, sometimes their 3-year plans, we might receive a survey with just a few questions. We might, we do a lot of like key informant interview conversations where maybe the organization has a consultant kind of helping them do their strategic plan, and that consultant gives us a call and other funders or other stakeholders in the community to just sort of say, hey, from your perspective, what are you seeing from this organization? And I think it's a really good opportunity to just kind of keep that relationship going, but also get that outsider perspective on the work that's happening. I hope that's helpful.
Well, it's helpful because I just wrote down, I need to contact a couple of foundations to, I really hadn't thought about that much. So thank you, Nancy.
Great. I think the next question, I think Cornelius, this may be for you, but when expanding housing, does Promise Corps have a bridge housing option for clients waiting on placement once matched? If so, how is it funded?
We do permanent supportive housing as well as affordable housing. We don't do any, as of now, any transitional housing or emergency shelter housing. That's more so in our community. So I really can't answer that one.
So if folks have other questions, I think Tanya said that she's let everyone have the capacity to come off mute if they want to. So feel free to raise your hand and we'll call on you for other questions. In the meantime, Diane, I wanted to ask, you talked about how you have 6 months of reserves and you're already planning for 2026 just in case. I guess my question was like in your mind, how far in the future are you planning, or how far are you making sure you have kind of these reserves in place? And Cornelius, kind of the same question, or Nancy, if you have advice on that, as part of our webinar topic, right? It's creative budgeting, but part of that is the planning, right? And how did you do the process of how far in advance would you go, and things like that?
We started out hoping we could have 3 months in reserve. I mean, that was the goal to start with. And as we began to reach it, we realized, wait a minute, 6 months would be absolutely wonderful for us. So what we're hoping to do is duplicate that again. I don't want to have to use that 6 month of reserve. So we are looking at, we need the money to be reserved for 2026 as things we think may change a lot. And we would, so that's, I don't have a mapped out plan other than I want another 6 months of reserve, because I think we will end up spending maybe half of the reserve that we have now. Is what it looks like with our current budget. So I've got to replace that and come up with another. So that's our goal, is to always have 6 months of reserve. I have no idea whether we'll meet that or not. But what it made me realize is, in having that as the goal, that I've got to see double the people that I'm seeing now. The other thing is, I would love for our board to give more or be more. None of us have fundraising boards that we hope they're wonderful people, but nobody, I don't know anybody that has this fundraising board that they can completely depend on. So what I did was ask them all, give me 10 names. I'll go see them. You make the introduction. And I really believe with 8 people on a board with 80 names, out of that, we're going to raise another month or so of reserve money, but it's very specific goals.
And one thing I would like to add, which could be scary, but possibly with your banks and credit unions and all of that, build a line of credit just in case you know you may need that. And until you can get to the point where you're building and start somewhere. And
Yeah.
Our pastor often talks about tithing, the fact that it's not about equal gift, it's about equal sacrifice. So if you can give 1% or you have $0 in reserve, if you can get it to 5%, start somewhere small and begin to grow that. But work with your banks and your credit unions and places like that to see if you get a line of credit.
Great. Thank you all. Diane, what folks, someone had a follow-up. They wanted to know, when you talk to private donors, are you telling them you're looking for funds for your reserve? Are you that specific and what the
No.
use of it will
No,
be?
they're operating funds because they're going to be used for operation of our programs and for rent and supportive services and all that. So I'm not talking about building a reserve fund to them specifically. I don't think most people would be open to that initially. And once I have an relationship with them, then yes, we can go into all of that, but not when I'm talking about what we need to operate on.
Right. Any other questions from participants? Things you want to follow up on? Feel free to raise your hand, or I think you can come off mute, Miss Tanya, inform me.
We're waiting for people to, if there are other questions. There is one other thing I did want to share. I've been on a lot of calls, like we all are. It's a challenging time right now. And one of the things I've heard kind of from a lot of different folks is that some nonprofit leaders are feeling like, abandoned, or like we're not hearing from our funders and they're turning their backs on us, or I don't like that kind of like, oh, no one wants to feel that way. And that may be the case. I don't know. I can't speak for other funders, but one thing I would just say is, if you do receive private funding and you're not hearing from your funder, reach out to them, because it may be that like this is a really challenging time. And I can tell you, like our foundation is struggling to determine like how do we respond? What do we do? There's this changing landscape. And I try to do my best to be connected in the community and initiate contact and all of those things. But even I fall behind, or I might think, if I don't know what our strategy is, I don't want to reach out and not have anything to share. And so I can say, when I do receive calls from our grantee partners, I'm always just like, oh, I'm so glad that they did it this time, and we're going to connect anyway. And so share what you know, share what you need, ask questions. But if you're feeling frustrated or you're not hearing from someone, you're concerned, I would just really encourage you to email, reach out, pick up the phone, text, however you do that, to funders, and open those lines of communication.
Yeah, so important to communicate with each other right now. Erin, we'd love to hear from you.
Hi, I'm not sure if this is a dumb question or not, but as a nonprofit organization, we have to every year need to have like our balanced budget and everything like that. Does like using a reserve fund strategy have any impacts on that, or like any considerations that we would need to take into account for like figuring out how to make our budget balanced at the end of the year, or whenever whenever your budgeting is?
Well, having our reserve doesn't increase our expense on the expense side. So, you know, we are able to have some income from that reserve because we have it in some CDs and things like that. So that helps on our income side. It doesn't increase, you know, it's going to show on your balance sheet for the people that know how to read them and look at it. I'm not sure I'm really answering your question. We're not worried about, we know it's going to be a balanced budget, but we are still going to have more income than we do expenses. But that reserve fund is explainable to people that need to understand what it is.
Aaron, are you asking about if ending the year with a surplus and that thinking that that could be a problem for some people looking at it? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I didn't know like how it like played out in like the budgeting process for like nonprofits, like if you had any concerns about the like meeting the expending down the reserve, or if it showed as like too much profit and like how that was implicated. But if it's you answered my question, that's all. Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question, Aaron. I think don't apologize for that. I think like one of the things for me with reserve is always like you're not really making a profit as a nonprofit. You're not giving that money to someone else to benefit from. You're keeping it within your organization, and then you're going to use it in the future for things that your organization needs for the people you're serving. Like that. So sometimes I think is having worked in nonprofits for all my, I think that's something that sometimes we have a hard time coming over that hump of our thinking. It's okay to have extra money as a nonprofit. It doesn't mean we have a zero balance sheet every year. It's actually, like Diane's saying, it's fantastic to have extra, right? Because then you know you have a cushion when things get hard or you need a little bit in a certain part of your organization. So I think that's a fantastic question that you asked.
Is it okay to ask a follow-up?
Yeah, I think
Are there any constraints that you know of on the level of reserve that you would be able to have as like a nonprofit before it would become like an issue in your like audits?
We've had 2 years with some reserve and we've not had any issues. In my state, we're under the Secretary of State, and so our reports didn't have any problem with the Secretary of State. I mean, actually, if you were in a for-profit business, you want to have some money so that it's not month to month. And I think we're so used to in the nonprofit world. I mean, I have been for 30 years of it being month to month. That's really not a good business model. So this gives you the option. For instance, couple months ago when we had to make a drawdown and we couldn't get in to make it. I will be honest, it's the first time I've ever not had to be worried about that because I knew I could pull it out of that reserve account and make that $85,000 draw that I would have had difficulty with. So it's the best business plan so that you have some money that you're not month to month.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Fantastic. And yeah, someone put in the chat 6 months is the best practice. We have one more question, but I'm going to pause for just 1 minute because we're getting close to the top of the hour. We did schedule this to go 15 minutes after. So if those of you have to leave at the top of the hour, we're going to launch a poll just because we do want to hear from as many of y'all as possible about how this was, what you got out of it, and what you'd like to see in the future. And then I'm going to ask while the poll's up, I'm going to say, I'm going to ask the next question because I think it's a good one that I think the panel they have a lot of insight on. So someone's comment was inviting clients to share their experience and success stories might be worthwhile. Any thoughts on this and as it relates to appealing for funding support. So I think they're like bringing, right, a client or a participant in your program with you when you're making some of these pitches to supporters or funders.
I think it's a good idea, but I never want a client to feel like they are show and tell. I really will not. I just shared a story with a faith congregation that wanted to have a story of a success story that they could share next Sunday. Of course, I didn't tell her particular name, but I like, if I'm going to have someone share, it's going to be someone who is successfully navigating life after they have received our help and they're now doing it on their own. I'm not comfortable with someone in our program. Sometimes I don't know if they're going to make it. And so I do that a lot, but it's someone who has successfully completed a 1 or a 2 year program, whatever they're in.
And I agree with Diane. I hate the dog and pony show whole thing. We definitely won't do that. If we do, we have folk that have experienced homelessness or lived experience on our board, and they're part of who we are and what we do. And also those that we have genuine relationships with are folk that go with us to different places and different things. So it's not that we're using you for this particular purpose. It's you're a part of our organization and our family. This is a part of the work that we do, and they agree to go along with us as partners in this whole fight to share that story.
I will say on occasion, I have been at a meeting and, an organization is, I think, coming from a really great place, wanted to allow someone who is currently receiving services to share their story. I have not seen that go well, and it tends to always feel kind of exploitative and not appropriate. There might be a way to do that in a way that's great and empowering. And if you have cracked that code, more power to you, but I'd be really careful with it.
Great. Just gonna pause again and see if someone else wants to come off mute and ask another question. We are at the top of the hour, so thank you all for being with us today. I think we're going to drop some links in the chat. We do have a web page where we'll post items. Thanks, Tanya. You're the best. Please stay in contact with us. We have the left is our landing page for the series we've been doing on financial management and non-creative budgeting. So if you missed the one in February, you can get the info there, but we'll also post things from this one there as well. And then if you just want to see our website and stay in contact with us, please do that. I think we'll drop the TA one. Like some of you might have specific questions, feel free to reach out to us with that as well. Okay, and I got one more question in the Q&A. For vulnerable populations that we're focusing on, they're being removed as priorities by the federal administration, and therefore funding opportunities are dwindling. How are you reassuring clients that services are going to continue despite large gaps or unknowns in the budget? How do you reassure donors of the same thing while at the same time asking for them to contribute to the need? It seems like everything is getting more competitive and panic is setting in for some orgs as we approach the new fiscal year. So I think, Tani, those are very insightful reflections on the time we're in and really good questions for the panelists. So I'll open it up to comments.
I wish we all had the answer to that.
Yeah, 100%.
From my perspective, working at a foundation, we are hearing the high level news, right? But it's been really helpful to hear any factual information from a grantee partner. So that information might be, hey, Nancy, I get a text. Hey, Nancy, I work at this organization. I just want to let you know, there's a lot unknown right now. We have not received our, grant agreement with HUD yet. Normally by now we would have. It's making us nervous. Just wanted to let you know. Like, that is helpful to me to know that information, even though that's not a lot of information. to bring that back as because we're scrambling, like trying to figure out how do we respond? What do we do right now? And we don't know, folks. So any information that we're able to get has been helpful. And so for the part about communicating with funders, I would just say any information you have, hey, we got the letter and there's this new line that says this could be canceled anytime. We want to know that. Right, because that means that those programs now sort of feel like they might be in jeopardy, and it just opens up those lines. So I would just communicate, even if I mean, and again, that's just my perspective, but, or ask, and maybe even just reaching out and saying, look, funder, here's the situation we're in. My inclination is to let you know what's going on. Is this too much? Do you want more? And just have the conversation.
I had to change the way I was thinking about it too, in that it really is an opening to talk with more people. The times are a little more uncertain. I'd like to get with you, just kind of tell you what we're doing, because we're going to have to think of possibly new streams of funding. Again, who do you know that I could go see? And it opens that door. As far as reassuring clients, we're just having to be very careful because they hear the news and they're asking questions, and we don't want to tell them we don't have any idea. But, you know, we're doing everything we can, and we'll keep you updated. I promise you, we will keep you updated as things go along. You're not going to not hear from us. I think that's about all I can do with them.
Other questions? Mary, did you have any questions, follow-ups burning in your mind?
I'm wondering, just during this uncertain time with PSH and other programs, are either you, Diane, or you, Cornelius, working with your housing authorities or others to help people through a moving on strategy to get to maybe a more stable type of voucher for someone who is disabled to not be so worried at this moment in time?
Yes, we're trying to. Unfortunately, some of the voucher programs have gone away too. So, but yeah, our case managers are looking at every option they can come up with.
Right, and then here in Memphis, Shelby County, our COC is working with us and the housing authorities to see if there's any vouchers that we can set aside for those being a part of this move on strategy. How can we move these folk on to have room and space for others? So that's something that we're doing locally, is being intentional about that and see if there are any extra vouchers anywhere. Well, it's not extra because nobody has extra, but just to see if there's some vouchers that can be set aside specifically for this population that we serve.
Communicate, right? Let folks know your need and what's going on so they can we can all start making plans together. We had one more question. It's not necessarily for the panel, but I'm interested in Diane. Diane, I think you already mentioned this, but Cornelius, I'm not sure you have. Someone's curious about how many orgs on the call have fundraising staff to pursue donations, grants, etc., to supplement their government funding. I think Diane, it sounds like you're the show there, but I just wanted to confirm.
We don't have a full-time development person. We have 2 or 3 people in our leadership programs in upper management, and we all are designating a certain amount of time. My expertise is not the computer part. I'll get up in front of people. Someone else is better at reaching out. So we have not hired a full-time development person. We haven't found the right person that fits with the culture of our organization yet. And we would rather, at this point, we having to do it ourselves until we find that right person.
Right. Folks, please respond in the chat if you have a separate fundraising staff. Cornelius, how does it work at your organization?
So we were like Diane, we had staff that were doing dual roles, and then we looked at it and said, are we at a place now where if we had, which was one of our own that was a part of our culture, that just spent their time based on their unique skill sets, not wanting to be out in front of people, didn't want to manage anybody, but loved being left alone in a room with the computer and had writing skills to be able to do that? And could we carve out that time? And with the amount of time they spent, would they be able to pay for themselves? And over a 2 or 3 year period, we looked at that and decided, okay, yes, this person here, because if not, she's going to leave our organization because she's doing things she really don't want to do. But if she could go in this room and be able to write and apply and bring additional funds in, then she would pay for herself. So we've recently done that, and then just added another person recently.
Yeah, so certainly part of the growth process, right? You're growing to a place to
Right.
understand you need someone. We've had some folks in the chat. I feel like
Now, let me say this one thing,
Yeah.
and I said this yesterday, which could be scary. We had someone in the for-profit sector come to us and said, once you look at that, you don't have to have all the money for that person today, that year's salary. But again, it could be scary because you think, well, if I never raise any additional funds, then I just cost myself. So you got to be careful with that, making sure you have the right person, you have a right plan, you have some places that you could go apply to. But if you have the right person, the right plan, but not the money right then you might want to look at that and then bring that person on and say, not to them, but I don't have the money right now, but the goal is to have that and then watch it comes in. So again, could be a little scary, but sometimes you got to do things and step out on faith and go make it happen.
Right. But yeah, not best practice to hire folks and say, by the way, you need to fundraise for your own salary. So thank you for joining us. Yeah, we're getting a lot of different responses in the chat. Some organizations do, some organizations, like people have said they're the first person to have that job. Some don't, and they spread it across their executive leadership and their board of directors do things just like you all have been saying. So I'm gonna pause and see if there's one last question before we finish up for today. Otherwise, we can finish a few minutes early. I think Tanya, we can put that last slide up again. So if people want one last look at the resource page, if they want to scan those QR codes or grab those links, and then they have any other questions, they can. Yeah, we had a little issue. Lots of people, some people's chats are going to panelists, host and panelists only. So sorry about that. I guess that's a setting that maybe we didn't set right at the beginning. So, but trying to put all the comments to the people. Okay. Great. Well, I want to thank the panelists, Nancy, Cornelius, Diane. Thank you so much for joining us today and all the information and experience you provided. I think it's just really priceless that you came to us and gave us your time. You're just so generous with it. We really appreciate you. And Mary, thank you so much for leading the panel, and thank you all for attending. Thank you all for staying over the extra 15 minutes. We really appreciate your time. And again, reach out to us with questions. And if you have ideas for the future, we'd love to, keep doing these if people will attend and we find topics that are really useful to help you all out. So have a great day.
All right. Thanks, guys.